You fix holes in free agency, you build foundations in the draft. What does today mean for the Jacksonville Jaguars? How are they going about this? And what's the future look like for their draft? Welcome to Locked On NFL Draft.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On NFL Draft Show. I'm your host, former NFL and AFL defensive back Eric Crocker, and of course, as always, joined by my co-host, Ryan Tracy. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. You can find us on social media as well, on Twitter at Eric_Crocker, and also Ryan Tracy at Ryan Tracy NFL. Today we're getting into the Jacksonville Jaguars. Did I say that right? Because I everybody gets teased it. Some people, I've been saying Jaguars my whole life. People are like, it's not Jaguars, it's Jaguars, or however you say that. But the Jacksonville Jaguars made really kind of some, I don't know if splashy moves is the kind of way to word this, but they went out and spent a lot of money on some potential free agent receivers. And again, right now, as we're recording this, it's March 14th. So this is the first day of the tampering period. So nothing is in ink just yet, but numbers are coming through. Guys are getting these lucrative contracts, but I know you kind of did some adding up with some of these numbers on who they signed. And we are, again, going to tie this into their philosophy as far as viewing receivers, drafting receivers, and what guys I feel like would have been better suited to go, through the draft with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I know you did some numbers on some of the guys that they signed.
Yeah, this is Warren Sharp that I got this from. Shout out to Warren. $117.5 million in the last two free agent periods for their top four starting pass catchers, three receivers and a tight end, including Evan Ingram, who I think is a great fit. But that is a lot of money when you're attacking one part of your offense or your team in general, all through free agency. Again, free agency should fill holes. Your foundation should be set by the draft. That's what is just so crazy about this. I know there's a lot that caught me off guard. How did you take the signings today for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, and I think Christian Kirk is talented, and even Marvin Jones, who they've already had, but Zay Jones, he was one of my favorite receivers in the class when he was coming out. But as of right now, I mean, just kind of spending that type of money and capital on those players. And I get it. He needs weapons. I mean, at some point, when I say he, Trevor Lawrence, yes. I turned on the game last year, and at one point, Tavon Austin was his number one receiver. That's not ideal. All right. So I get it in the sense of going out and getting your young franchise quarterback weapons, but just the way they went about it. And it reminds me a lot of last season with the New England Patriots. They went into the free agency. They went and got two pass catchers at the receiver position, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. And then they went and got two tight ends, Jonathan Smith and Hunter Henry. And what everybody's saying right now that the Patriots need to do, get Mac Jones weapons. Like, their weapons weren't really good. Their weapons weren't explosive, but they go out and they spent all that money on those guys. I feel like Jacksonville Jaguars right now is kind of taking a page out of New England's book where you want to throw all this money at these guys. And Christian Kirk, I mean, big money. I think people would say even big money for Zay Jones too. It was a little shocking, and we'll see how it plays out. But I don't necessarily agree with their philosophy there.
I think I'm with you. This reminds me, quite frankly, I'm getting ready to sell a house. Like, this is like the housing market, right? Like, you go in and you find a place that you like, you want to make an offer, you do that, but wait, there's another bidder, and they start bidding you up, right? And now all of a sudden you're like $100,000 over what they're asking for, right? And you don't get it. So what do? You go make the same offer to the next house down the street that maybe isn't as nice, certainly isn't as experienced, right? But you're already sold yourself into spending that money. You might as well spend it, right? That's what this feels like.
Now, I think more than anything, what does it mean for a guy like Laviska Shenault, who, just a couple years ago, a lot of people are really high on him. I necessarily wasn't, and I got made fun of because I did a top 20 rankings, which I'll never do again for receivers. But I try to keep it at 5 now. But I did a top 20, and he was like 18. on my list. And a lot of people are like, how in the heck, how do you have Shenault that low? And I'm just like, I don't think he's very good. And I think, people get kind of enamored with the Deebo Samuel prospect and what he is. And Shenault, people felt like he could do those similar type things. And I just didn't see it. And right now, so far, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to pretend like I've watched every Jacksonville Jaguar game, but it hasn't worked out to the extent of them going out and spending the money on pass catchers that they did today. So what do you think it means for a guy like Shenault? Are they just kind of done with him? And sometimes this is what happens when you have new coaching staffs that come in.
I think it's one of two things. A, there's obviously a lot of transition. There's a lot of expectations that didn't get fulfilled, right? I was not huge on Shenault coming out either. I think I had him higher than you, but not by a ton. At the end of the day, I think it takes getting in the building. What Doug Peterson wants is somebody that can run his West Coast version of the offense, that can do what he needs to do in the base. I think he will find a way to use Shenault. I don't think it'll look necessarily like we've seen in the past, but I think it will work. And I think that's probably their fallback. Like if somebody isn't working particularly out of the slot well enough come week 5, week 6, you sprinkle them in a little bit more. You get a little bit of pop, hopefully. You can hand him the ball out of the backfield as well. Like there are some things that you can do with him that are unique. And I think that will just be kind of a natural evolution of the offense there under Doug Peterson. But it definitely seems like they didn't want to just line him up in a position. I would have put him on the line of scrimmage myself. That's fine. But and just kind of let him go. It didn't seem like that was in the cards from this staff.
We're going to look at the philosophy of, free agent receivers versus drafting receivers. What are the benefits of all that? And then later, we're actually going to come back and talk about some players in a mock simulation that would have been available to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the top of the second round and at the top of the third round. But first, we want to tell y'all a little bit about BetOnline, and it's that time of the year right now. As college basketball tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and information. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting, and you can also do your favorite Vegas casino games. Head over right now to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action and everything that BetOnline has going on right now. Go to the website, and that is at betonline.net. All right, BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Ryan, let's start talking about just kind of philosophies of the pass catchers, because I feel like now more than ever, you would think that people might learn from something that the Patriots did last year, which, again, Kendrick Bourne worked out, but even then,
True.
Is it ideal to have him as your #1 receiver? I think you like him to be maybe your third pass catching option, whether that's 2 receivers ahead of him or a tight end and a receiver, and then Kendrick Bourne. But Nelson Aguilar, the 2 tight ends, again, everybody's just saying it's not enough for Mac Jones. So how do you get it to be enough? And I think the draft is a way that you have to go. Now, I talked about the Patriots, talked about Jacksonville Jaguars, and we've also talked about kind of both of these teams missing on highly drafted players, whether it was N'Keal Harry with the New England Patriots, that hasn't quite worked out, or Laviska Shenault with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I still believe that you take as many swings through the draft as possible and kind of figure out if a guy could potentially blossom into the role that you need them to be, which is just, I mean, if you look at some of these guys and what they've been, like Zay Jones or whatever, like, can you be a legit wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3? What direction do you think that a team like Jacksonville or even the Patriots, what kind of lumped them in here, should have went with?
I think you got to mix it up more. I don't think, I mean, this is not just plugging a hole. This is like bashing down the wall to make more holes, to plug more holes. That's what this is. And it doesn't seem like it's the direction that I would suggest for the long term, but I think that's the key. And when we take a look at the 2 men at the top of the organization in Jacksonville, time is of an essence for both of them. Trent Baalke has got some heat on him. We've heard a lot of rumor around the league about the future down there, what has to happen in order to be productive. Doug Peterson, honestly, after leaving the Eagles, as well as Carson Wentz leaving the Eagles. And now Wentz has gone on to a second team and not done as you'd hope there, and now moved on to a third. There is also a sense of urgency there, I think. I wouldn't say that he needs to be quick, but I do feel like he wants to prove that, hey, I wasn't the problem in Philly. My offense works. If I have the tools that I need, I can make this work and be productive in this league. So I feel like it was, let's step right out right now and make a statement. And it feels like the philosophy kind of went out the window because of the sense of urgency for the two guys calling the biggest shots in this organization.
I wish I would have kind of researched this and looked it up before we got on here, but I'd be curious to see how beneficial has it been signing free agent receivers for teams as opposed to guys that they've drafted and developed, right? Because, we always see movement, and for one reason or another, some guys just a little bit older and they go to a new team. We've seen some trades that happen, guys like Odell Beckham. He's been traded twice now. But how often does a receiver who's a free agent get paid a ton of money, step in, and still be productive? Can you think of someone off the top of your head who is like, oh, you know what? They paid him a ton of money and it really worked out for them?
You could make an argument that Odell moving over to Los Angeles this year paid off. Was it a ton of money? I mean, you can argue about that. Was it a ton of production?
Was he traded or released? He was released, huh?
I thought he was. Maybe I'm revisionist history could be happening here. I'm not sure, but there are some precedents for it. I don't feel that it happens all the time. I think in the end, you see the same scenario over and over. And old friend Therese Paylor, and everybody go check out Breaking Tea for your all juice stuff. Support Therese Paylor and the Pound Nation that he has left behind in his absence. Used to always say, contract year is undefeated. You're going to get the best juice out of a guy in that contract year. And what happens after that? You get paid. You lose maybe a little bit of your urgency. I don't know that it's anything other than human nature, to tell you the truth. It's not purposely guys get paid and like, oh, I'm going to turn it in now. But you do see a loss of an edge there a lot of times. And I think that more than most, there's less room for less margin for error, that is, with the wide receiver group when they're signing free agency.
Yeah, and I think Odell, kind of to revisit his situation, it obviously was a terrible, scenario, what was going on with him and Baker Mayfield. His dad coming out and posting videos of his son running routes, which, how did your dad get all 22? Odell might have been feeding him that, but Odell clearly wanted out of Cleveland. It wasn't working out. And I believe they let him go. And he was, there were some teams that were just interested in the services, one being the Rams. They brought him in to finish the year, and now he's a free agent again. But gosh, I wish I would have wrote this down, because I know off the top of my head, it's hard to think of a time where it's just like, you know what, I'm going to go out and pay this free agent receiver. This guy hit the market a ton of money and is going to work out for the best. Maybe Allen Robinson. That's a guy that kind of comes to mind in recent years. I thought he went out and did well, but you've seen a lot of other guys. It just not work out well, including guys like Kenny Golladay, who went from the Lions to the New York Giants. And I mean, he had a terrible year. Now, circumstances, makes a difference as well. But
absolutely,
I feel the way to go is probably draft and develop a guy, at least like that guy, like your wide receiver one, the guy you're going to put all your eggs in that basket, probably has to be a guy that you drafted and developed. And sometimes it takes multiple swings at getting that guy. Not every team has that pure wide receiver one, but when you get them, you're better off for it, as opposed to just trying to fill the holes with free agent guys. And this is a conversation I did have with my 49er people, because I haven't really thought about it from this perspective.
And it makes it that harder for not just what you do right now, but for the longevity of it. You have to have guys that you bring in and develop from the draft in order to be able to bridge some of those contracts, depending on growth and your cap number, that kind of thing. You got to have some nice, solid production from guys that are on rookie contracts. That's just the way that it has to be.
I mean, they just paid a lot of guys, so not too many rookie contracts going on with the Jacksonville Jaguars. But what we're going to do now is we're going to, turn the page a little bit and talk about some receivers that potentially would have been there at the top of the second, and some guys that potentially could have been there at the top of the third if they wanted to kind of double dip on day two. And would you take those receivers over the guys that they signed to big money contracts? We're going to get into that and more. But first, I want to talk to you a little bit about Rock Auto. All right. And this episode is definitely brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. And why endure often pointless and seamless and intimidating questioning about your vehicle and wait while a person behind a counter orders all the parts on their computer, choosing only the brands that they happen to carry in their warehouse. You have a computer, you have a phone, all right? You can go to rockauto.com right now. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Yes, 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer, and they have everything that you can need, whether it's brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil. I mean, they even have carpet, which was crazy when I first saw that. All right. You guys need to go explore their easy to use website today and find a solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts that are available for your car or your truck. And when they ask how you found them, right on Locked On Network. All right. The Locked On team, we sent you over, and you'll see that in the How Did You Hear About Us box. All right. Let them know we sent you. They have amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, Ryan. I did a little exercise here, and I was just curious if they would have said, you know what, want to go the draft and develop route, or at least just one guy who potentially would have been available in the second or third round. So maybe you don't, go to back-to-back receivers in second round, third round, but you also don't go out and pay, Christian Kirk $84 million. Oh man, that's a lot of money. I think Christian Kirk, he's a solid receiver, but I never saw Christian Kirk and was like, that's an $84 million receiver. But he's solid. He's solid. But instead of doing that, we're paying Zay Jones, 3 years, $30 million contract. Obviously the guaranteed money is a different story. But what would it look like if they would have went the draft route? So I did a mock and I picked as Jacksonville. Obviously, I picked number one, did not take a receiver, but waited until their first pick in the second round and their first pick in the third round to see what receivers were available. So I don't know if the NFL draft is going to play out like this, especially with this first guy. I'd expect him to be gone, but on the clock for them, first pick in the second round, Chris Olave, receiver out of Ohio State. All right. A few other guys that are available at that spot who I would not mind taking: Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, Christian Watson, receiver out of North Dakota State, Sky Moore, he's been solid, and George Pickens, who I thought had a terrific combine. He's only going to keep getting better. He missed a lot of time, but that was a guy who was like the guy at Georgia before the injury happened. So that's just at that spot, right? Now you look at some of those names I just mentioned: Chris Olave, Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, Christian Watson, Sky Moore, George Pickens. I feel like there should be a conversation about, would I rather have one of these guys or pay Christian Kirk $84 million?
I mean, I'd run Dotson or Olave out of the slot predominantly and let them take that role that is presumably going to be Christian Kirk. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. The only question is, Christian Kirk is a proven commodity that he can get you 982 yards in a season on 77 targets. That makes sense. Is he a 1,400-yard receiver? I'm not so sure. Is that what's demanded for 72 as a minimum? Possibly $84 million on that contract? Kinda. So for me, I'm looking at that, and I'll take my chances on both those rookies over paying that kind of fee for a slot receiver, specifically one that hasn't been able to be the game-changing type in the offense that he just came from.
And that was an offense that they really had wide open. They had a receiver that gave these guys plenty of opportunity, throwing the ball all over the place, and he did well. But just, I never saw an $84 million guy. All right, so now let's move on to the third round and some guys who were available for me at their first pick in the third round. First guy out of Cincinnati, Alec Pierce, who we're probably not talking about enough. No. All right, Alec Pierce, 6'2", 211 pounds, ran a 4.33 official on that fast turf over there in Indianapolis. But the guy who's a contested catch guy, he can win vertically. And I was very impressed, and I made note of this right away at the Senior Bowl practices. I was impressed with his twitch and movement skills, and he was a lot more twitched up than I was expecting. So that's a guy who, all right, third round, definitely potentially there. David Bell out of Purdue, maybe didn't test as well. So he's a guy that definitely could slide to the third round, but he could be someone that's productive. He was ultra productive from the gate out of there at Purdue. John Mechie from Alabama. He's a guy who's come off of a torn ACL, but he can win inside. He can win outside. He's a route runner. He can stretch the field. I feel like he can give you a lot of everything that you're looking for from a guy like Christian Kirk or even Zay Jones. And this last guy I noted here, Calvin Austin, smaller receiver, 5'8", 175 pounds, receiver out of Memphis, ran in the 4.3s, plays as fast, has return capability as well. Watched him at the Senior Bowl as well. Another guy who one inside, one outside. They didn't know how to guard him. They tried to press him. That didn't work. They tried to play it off. He just ran by them. They tried to play upfield shoulder to take away the go route, and he sat his route down. And he just beat guys every which way possible. So I look at these options here, and again, maybe not proven commodities. And if you just pay one of those guys, I get it. But to pay both Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, and I probably would have went more the Zay Jones route and drafted one of these guys and said, you know what, I want to really go into the draft and get better at the receiver position, and I'm going to prioritize it, whether it's in the top of the second or the top of the third. I would have liked Zay Jones and Chris Olave over paying Christian Kirk $84 million.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the best way to go about it too, because there are a lot of options in this draft, specifically at a guy that can line up in the slot predominantly. Everyone that you mentioned, I do like Alec Pierce out of the slot as well. I didn't see him separate on film as much as he showed his change of direction when we saw him, but I would think you can grow into that. I think there's room there, and like you said, he can win contested, and he can take it down the field as well. But that's just the start. You still have guys like Khalil Shakir. You still have, if you're putting your money into Zay Jones on the outside and you need to get somebody else to contribute, could Kyle Phillips give you 80% of Hunter Renfrow in the slot right now? Possibly. That gives you another weapon. You could come back with Jarrett Stearns. There are a lot of slot heavy type receivers in this draft class that I think you could plug in, teach. Yes, there'll be a delay, but I think you can get some production out of them as well.
For the price of these free agent players, especially on day one. Like, if you want to go out and you want to pay big money to a guy day one, all right, I get it. But like three pass catchers all together with Ingram, you are paying a premium. And not saying I know more than general manager Trent Baalke, which I saw him kind of destroy the 49ers, but not saying I know more than Trent Baalke and those guys. But I would say I kind of disagree with the way that they address this, and I could be completely wrong. But I just think that
you're not carrying a torch for him or anything, right?
Well, NFL receivers coming out of college right now, they've done a very good job of being productive. Yeah. And we'll see. Could they have utilized that money elsewhere? Could they have utilized that money to really help the front seven on either side of the ball? Obviously, I'm pretty sure they'll address that in the draft as well. Could they have gotten better defensively? I know people complained a lot about the defense for them. Could they have spent more money there? I feel like there's a lot of different directions that the Jacksonville Jaguars potentially could have done. So,
yeah, I will say this though, and I'd like your take as well. I like the Ingram signing quite a bit. I think that helps Lawrence. I think that helps ease into some of the options that Doug Peterson wants to run in that offense. Like I like that fit quite a bit.
And you talk about Trevor Lawrence and what he's good at, and I like the Ingram signing as well. I think he could be the terrific receiver there. What made Trevor Lawrence, like peak Trevor Lawrence when he was like at his peak at Clemson, a lot of times, it was having those 6'4" receivers who you could just throw the ball up to. And T. Higgins and Ross, I almost said John Ross, but T. Higgins and Ross, they just went up and made plays for the guy. And, you didn't have to be perfect with your accuracy. You didn't have to be pinpoint. I'm going to throw the ball in the area and let you make a play. Who is that guy on the roster right now? Is it Marvin Jones? Maybe. Has a little bit of that. Christian Kirk? Not sure he's the best contested catch guy, but definitely can win vertically with speed. Zay Jones? Good receiver. Solid. Not sure if he's that guy, though. And then Shenault. So, I would have actually liked to see them maybe get like a big field stretcher to help their young quarterback throw the ball down the field and maybe take a little bit of pressure off.
Well, I do have news for you. One Justin Ross is available in this draft. It could be had likely as a late day 2, maybe a day 3 guy.
We're going to see. I want to see them do right by Trevor Lawrence. Give him the pieces. Do well, but
Mhm.
don't do weird things with building the roster. We'll see if this plans out. But we want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. After you listen to this, also listen to Locked On Chiefs with Ryan Tracy. Listen to Locked On 49ers with myself and my co-host Brian Peacock. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe and know that you can listen to the audio version as well on any platform that you choose. So follow us on social media, all that good stuff. Leave reviews. Tell us how you feel about what they did. Do you like what the Jacksonville Jaguars did with spending all this money on pass catchers? Hopefully later this week we can talk to the Jacksonville Jaguar host of the Locked On Network, and he'll give us a little bit more insight. But that's going to do it for this episode. We will see y'all tomorrow when we have John Harris on. Peace.